Hello, welcome back to the Summer Day Studios YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at 3D modeling a hard surface asset from start to finish. This is probably going to be a small mini-series, 2 or 3 parts at most. So in the past few 3D modeling videos, I've talked about how to handle more complex shapes and some tips on how to get better at hard surface modeling in general. So in today's video, I wanted to quickly create a short mini-series on actually how to apply these tips and advice on a real model to hopefully give you a better idea of what these tips look like in practice and help you make better models. So I come from a VFX for film and TV background, and I'm going to prep this model as if I were in a studio setting, and hopefully that's going to give you some insight into how that's approached if you're planning on getting into working professionally as a 3D modeler in a studio. In an actual studio environment, you may be given 3D scans or a lot of photography or just concept art when you're making a model, but it really depends on what you're making, whether that's a real object or if it's entirely fictional, right? So today we're going to be looking at using reference, how to set up blueprints, which is very, very important, that particular type of reference in Maya, and how to block out your model like we talked about in the previous few videos. And then in the next part after that, on the following video, probably next week sometime, we're going to take a look at how you can start adding details. So what exactly are we going to be modeling? Well, we're going to be taking a look at modeling this little droid guy from the video game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and the sequel as well, if you've played or seen that. The reason I picked this is because, well, I looked at a couple of different models. I was thinking about doing an aircraft similar to the one that I've shown you in my videos, but I think that might be a little bit too complicated to begin with. So there's some nice complexity to this model, a nice mixture of different kind of hard, solid angles and more curved shapes with a good amount of extra detail put in here as well, like these mechanical bits which you can go ahead and add in afterwards. And I feel like this is a good starting point to build off of and then do something more complex later. And I have other videos on more complex models as well, like the ship, if you want to check that out. But I figured this would be a good learning example. So this leads right on into what I wanted to talk about first, which is reference use. So I don't see enough people talking about this in 3D art, and art in general is the importance of reference. So whenever you're modeling something, whether it's fictional or it's real, you want to make sure that you have reference material. Now, obviously this droid here is entirely fictional. BD1's fictional. It's created for the video game. But we do have a lot of reference from it for in the game, as well as other models that people have made, or less like physical representations as well that people have made in real life for amusement parks and things like that. So we can really get quite close up and look at all the little details and pay attention to how all of that interacts and how all of that works. And most importantly as well, the actual shape of this, right? Because even though it's a robot, it is a character and it has a lot of character to it. And it's important that we get that right. So reference images are really important. And as you can see here, I've just gone to Google Images, collected a few and put these into, this is a piece of software called PureRef, by the way, which you can download for free. I highly recommend it. You don't have to use it, but it definitely makes it easier. It's a little reference window. You can move around and collate stuff like a collage and move things around. Anyway, as you can see, we've got things from a few different angles. That's really important so that you can see all the little details. You know, if we only had an image from this angle, that's great. It gives us a lot of the detail here. It shows us a lot of proportions and shapes, but it's not really going to tell us everything because it's an angle. We might not necessarily know how wide this is supposed to be, you know, unless we could see it more from the front, like with this image. We won't necessarily know what the details look like on the underside of the head, right? Like in this image here. So it's important to have various angles when you're modeling anything so you get a good idea of what it is you're making. In a studio setting, you'll typically be given reference. When I worked in VFX, if it was a real object, you might often be provided with a 3D scan, which is always helpful. Then in the way you can kind of trace the model. You'll often be given concept art if it's a fictional object. Or you may also just be given a little bit of photography, and it's not uncommon to have to find reference yourself. So I would very much put yourself within the frame of mind that it's good to look for reference yourself as well. Whether you're a hobbyist, you have no plans of getting into an actual studio, or you do want to. So one of the best reference you can use when modeling something that already exists are blueprints. And if you've never seen a blueprint, it's essentially just a plan, a schematic like this, that you can see things from a few different angles. So you can see here we've got the droid, our DB1. You can see him from the front, from the side, from the back, and from the top, okay? And I've got a few different versions here as well. These were very kindly provided online by these two artists here on ArtStation. I think they created these themselves, so I'll put links to those in the description if you want to get these and follow along. And what you can then do with reference like this is you can take this image, and then what I like to do is just use the default Windows image viewer, but you can also do this in Paint or Photoshop or whatever else, GIMP, whatever your image editor choice is. And then you can go ahead and cut out the different panels from this into different sides. So I've gone ahead and cut out these images for the back, the front, the side and the top, which are going to be the most important ones. Then we can take this and put this in Maya and actually model from it, right? Using image reference, image planes, which is something I see a lot of people struggle with. But once you start getting into it, it's not too difficult, and it actually makes the whole process so much easier because it takes out a lot of the guesswork. Next, finally, before we actually get started, because I've been talking for way too long and we need to get into doing some actual modeling, another really, really important thing is scale, okay? Now, it's harder when the object is fictional, but we do have somewhat of an idea of how big this guy is. Luckily, this artist here has provided the measurements for us in millimeters, I think. So we know that from this antenna to this antenna, it's 185 millimeters, or about 18.5 centimeters, okay? Whatever units you want to work in. So regardless of what you're making, whether it's a little droid, a plane, or a landscape, you always want to make sure that things are scaled correctly, just because that's going to help you, and it's definitely going to help other departments if you do work in a 3D environment. So that's always something to think of as well. So let's actually do some practical stuff. Let's start setting up these image planes. So like I said, I've gone ahead and cut out the front, back, side, and top angles. So we're going to go ahead and use these in Maya. And to do that, we're going to go up to Create, and we're going to create a free image plane. If you've never used these before, these just allow you to add images to Maya to model from. So we're going to select image name, and then to begin with, I am just going to take the front. And now you can see we have that image there in Maya. What we want to do is we can now align this with our front view. So I'm just pressing space, and then we're coming into these 4 views here. If you can't get to that by default, click on this little button here, and then that will allow you to see these 4 views. What I like to do is just make sure the little feetsies of this guy are sitting on the bottom of the grid, right? Because whenever you're modeling something, whether you're in a studio, if you want to do it for yourself, it's generally a good idea just to model things to the grid to keep things nice and clean, and it makes things more compatible with other software. It's also nicer to pick up for other artists if you work in a studio, right? Like the riggers or texture artists and so on, animators. So let's go ahead and create another image plane. This time we're going to take the side. Okay, and we now need to rotate that to our side camera, which will probably be this one here. So we'll just rotate it like that. Want to make sure it's facing the same way as our front view. And then the trick here now is, this can be a little bit tricky, is we need to get this to line up with our front image. And the way we're going to do that is by using these lines. Okay, so I'm going to just set the pivot point of this guy to the bottom of the foot. Okay, so we have a consistent reference point, and then I'm just going to hold X and snap that to the bottom of the grid. Now, all I need to do is just make sure that I scale this up a little bit, and you can see now that all these lines line up, okay, roughly. Sometimes blueprints aren't perfect, you just have to make do, but you can see these lines line up, the top of the head, the bottom of the body, the top of the body, so we know that that is accurate. Okay, and now we know we can model from the front and the side, and that's already taking us most of the way there, but just for because we can, and to make it even easier for ourselves, we'll create one more free image plane. This time we'll go ahead and put in the top, and we will again rotate that so that's sitting in the correct orientation, right? Everything's pointing towards the front. Very important that you do that. And then again, we're going to bring this up to the highest point of the head. We'll probably set the pivot point again just to the absolute extremity here at the front. Move that to the front of the side reference, and then we will just scale this until it fits, which it looks like it might do already. Yeah, there you go. Okay, all that means is I did a pretty good job at cutting this up earlier. So you might have to scale these a little bit more, but that's okay. As long as you do the tricks that I've just shown you, take your time with this stage. There really is no rush. It's okay to make mistakes as well, but definitely get this part right, because this is going to define everything else. As long as everything lines up, you will be okay. So this is all we need to get started now. So if I press spacebar again, we can start looking from these different angles. You can see we can see the top of our DB1 droid from the top. We can see him from the front, and we can see him from the side. So what that will mean is when we start modeling, if I put in a cube here, and I just go into the wireframe mode, you can see if I want to make the size, the part for the head, I can now scale this up to the width of the head, okay? And then fingers crossed, if I come to the top reference, it should now line up. And you can see that actually it doesn't, but I think hopefully that's just because the reference isn't centered on the grid. So if I just budge that over a little, okay, you can see now that the head's more centered on the grid. That cube now matches the width of the head as well, okay? It doesn't match this part up here, but that's because we know from this reference, that's this kind of like shade that comes over in the front of his eyes, right? So we can see from every angle how things are supposed to line up now. So that's how you get the reference set up, really, and it's kind of that straightforward. Again, I'll provide links to the blueprints in the description. So now on to the next most important part once you've got the reference up, and that is blocking. And again, we talked about this in the previous video. Blocking is incredibly important, and it's not something you want to skip. So it's, in my opinion, maybe the most important stage of any 3D modeling project, whether that's for environments, characters, hard surface, machinery, vehicles, anything. You know, this is a stage where you create a simple blocky, hence the name, really just using basic shapes like cubes and cylinders to block out the shape of your subject. You should really, at this point, aim to create all the shapes and forms while keeping your model as simple as possible and as low poly as possible, just because it's going to make your job easier and quicker. And it also means if you make mistakes, then it's much easier to fix those mistakes because your model doesn't have a million subdivisions, right? You can see how easy it is for me to quickly edit the vertices on this cube like this and change the shape drastically. However, if I were to go ahead and smooth this guy a bunch into a sphere, you know, do the same thing now. You know, if I move one vertice, you can see it's going to be a lot harder. Okay, so you want to keep that low poly while being able to match the shape of your reference. And again, I can't stress this enough, take as much time as you need at this stage, okay? In a real studio setting, you might not get as much time as you need because you need to meet deadlines for the production, and so you can pass your model on to other departments like maybe texturing or the riggers and animators, but it's still key and important that you take your time to make sure you get everything right at this stage, the blocking stage, before you move on. And don't be afraid as well, like I said, to take your time or feel pressured to speed up. Because remember, at the moment, this is just for practice. You know, the speed can come later. It's like running, you know, if you've ever tried to improve your cardio. To begin with, you're going to be slow, but just focus on going the distance and reaching the destination. Being able to go that distance is so much more important than getting there in 2 seconds, right? Get there in a day, 2 days, however long it takes. Don't rush it. Do it right first, and you will thank yourself for it, and the speed will come later, okay? And you'll be more proud and happy with what you've done as well. And if you do make mistakes along the way, no matter how long it takes, don't beat yourself up either. I know it can get frustrating. If you need to, take a break. Everyone takes breaks, okay? I get frustrated with models from time to time. The models I've shown you in the past, there have been so many times where I got pissed off at myself and I'm like, oh, wow, you know, how am I going to fix this? So I go out for a run or go on a walk, and then, you know, I think about it then. I come back and I have an easier time, or even sleep on it sometimes and come back. You know, there's no rush in doing this. So take your time. You don't have to follow my pace. I'm going to be trying to go as slow as possible. But yeah, anyway, and don't worry about making mistakes. That's life, you know, and it's how you learn. Okay, so I've waffled on for long enough. Let's go ahead and actually start blocking this guy out. So what I like to do, like with all models, is start with a cube. And what we can do first of all is I like to start from the side. You can start from the front as well. I'm just going to start from the side here. And I pressed 4 just to go into wireframe preview so we don't have all this blocking the reference. You can also turn on X-ray as well if you prefer, just with this little square up here. But I like to do wireframe first. And I'm literally just going to go into vertex selection mode, and I'm just going to shape out the boundaries of this body. Okay, and we're going to do that from all the sides first. I'm just going to scale it out. Okay, and this overhang part here, I'm not necessarily worried about pulling that out that far, because to me, that's something we can do later. You can do it now if you want to. This is just how I prefer to work. But I'm just going to get the bounding box out there for now. I'm not worried about these extra cuts or anything like that. We're just getting the shape right. And again, we'll come into here, and now we can just scale this up so that it matches the width on the side. And then we can't see from the front what that's supposed to look like, but we know that because we've matched it from the side and from the front, Well, we can't see from the top, sorry, what it's supposed to look like, but we know that because we've matched it from the front and the side, that's going to be the correct size. Generally, that's all you really need. The top is just a nice extra nicety for us. So now that I've got the body blocked in, I will normally, well, sort of blocked in. We've got the bounding blocks, right? Just the basic cube. I normally then like to go and do the big shapes first. Like I was talking about in the previous videos when it comes to detailing and also with the blocking, I like to do the big shapes first. Get everything kind of done. You know, if you think small or big, medium, then small in that order, and things that I like to create. So again, I'm just going to do kind of a bounding box for the head here. We'll get that roughly to the same size. And again, I'm not worried about matching the width of everything here. I'm just worried about matching the main part of the head, which to me is this kind of square rectangular section, right? Obviously, you've got the eyes and things sticking out here that you can see from the side, but the main box of it is this section. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to adjust this until it matches mostly the shape. We'll pull this out, and then that will stop about there, because this is where the eyes come out from, and then we have this shade part here. And then I'm also going to pull this out to... you could pull it out to here, you could pull it out to here. I'll probably pull it out to here, and then we'll come in and edit this afterwards so that that matches with this diagonal part here, and then this curved part down here. Okay, and then we could go ahead and then start blocking in the legs as well, but I think for the time being, we'll just block in more parts of the head. So I'll just duplicate this cube because there's no point in making a brand new one. And I'm just going to make that fit against there. And then what I'll do is edit this so it starts to form the shape of this shroud that goes over the eyes. And again, I'm not worried about this angle for the time being. Like I said, I'm just doing the bounding box or the surrounding shape. Okay. If it gets to a point where you actually can't see the model you're working on from one of the views, like here from the front, that's because you're actually being occluded by the reference. So literally all you need to do is just move that out of the way. So I'm going to bring that forward because the camera's looking from this direction, right? So now that we can see it. Okay, and then now I can go ahead and scale this out to match the width of that part. And again, make sure to check all your angles. So if I come from the top, you can see that's matching the width and the length. So we know that our reference is working. And again, that's a good sign because it's going to give you confidence now that you know you can keep going and everything's lining up. So keep checking your different angles. What I'm actually going to do next is we're going to start editing some of these shapes, right? Now, this can be quite scary because for the time being, we've just been looking at cubes, but don't worry, we're still keeping everything super duper basic. Okay, I'm going to go into face select mode and I'm just going to delete some of these faces just so if I isolate this for a second by pressing Ctrl+1, we just have this plane. Okay, because then that's going to be even easier for us to shape than trying to do it with a cube. So I'm always trying to make this easier for myself. Now what I can do is I can select these top vertices and I can actually pull those in to match the angle of that. And you can see now we then need to pull these out so they match that angle a little bit as well. Okay. And I'm just going to hold down Control and Shift so I can slide these vertices up a little bit so that they match like that. And then maybe we'll bring this top part up a bit as well. And bring that in. And you can see I'm really taking my time, making sure I'm getting this to be as close to the reference as possible. You know, sometimes I might go a bit faster than this, but just really don't worry about matching the speed. Take your time as much as possible. You know, if it takes you 2 days to do this, that's fine. Really, I would honestly happily spend a week blocking out a model rather than jumping ahead and messing it up and realizing I have to change a bunch of stuff later on when it's too hard. So I've just gone ahead and added a bevel in there now. And you can see that's matching that curve there. You can actually see the lines on the reference, which is super useful. And we're just keeping that really simple at this stage. You know, you could go ahead and add in maybe 3 segments, 4 segments for this. I may do that for this shape just so that we have a bit more supporting topology because I know that this part's not going to change that much. You can see here that it is not too complicated of a piece. I'm confident that looking at all of these angles here that things are generally lining up. What I can then do is go ahead and extrude this in just to form the rest of that shape. Okay. And you can see it's a little bit inconsistent in the shape. So maybe we'll go ahead and just manually adjust some of these a little bit. And again, just to reiterate, I'm taking my time as much as possible. Okay. If it goes black like this when you're extruding, just go to mesh display and hit reverse, and that will fix that. So you can see now that part is blocked out. Then we go and isolate this. You can see things are starting to take shape. Again, it's super duper simple. Okay, but we're getting these key big shapes in. Okay, we could then go ahead and refine this even more. I'm going to use a lattice deformer as opposed to just editing these vertices manually, because you can see that's going to create issues. We want this to be a straight line. So this isn't a 100% of a modeling tutorial per se, but it's just showing you the process of how I do these things and showing you that I really do take my time when I'm doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and match the angle of that. Okay, and you can see now that's matching from the top, it's matching from the side, and matching from the front. Okay, and that's a real nice simple piece of geometry. But in essence, that part's now done. We don't have to worry about that part anymore, and that's already blocked in. One thing that's really important while you're doing this blocking stage as well is to look at your reference as well. If you have two screens, which I would highly recommend, even if it's just a really cheap one, just to have to your side, I'm always looking at my reference to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And looking at my reference, I can see that I did miss something. While the rest of the shape's pretty accurate, we don't have this slanted part here. So I know that I can go ahead, select these edges, okay, and see, oh, it is in fact in my blueprints. Hold down Control and Shift, and I can just slide those up. Okay, and it looks like there's also meant to be a little part here. So maybe now I can go ahead and add in a little edge. But you see, I'm only adding stuff when I need to. Okay. Now I know that I can bring this out to form the shape correctly. Okay. Realistically, I probably should have done that beforehand, and this is why we don't rush ahead. So we'll undo the lattice. Okay, there you go. Perfect example live for you. And then we can go ahead and fix this in a much more effective way. Now we can just slide these vertices. Okay. Then we can go ahead and do our lattice to put that back into place. So that's a real demonstration there of why it's good to take your time. Okay, because undoing mistakes is so much easier. If you imagine this had so many more divisions, that would be so much harder to fix. Okay, we can then maybe go ahead and look at starting to shape out the head a little bit as well. So you can see here that it's curved on top. Maybe we can then go ahead and select these two bits here, and then we can bevel those to make sure that matches. Just starting with two segments for the time being, because we want to make sure we're matching that. So I'm looking at where these vertices end. I know this vertex starts at the curve, this vertex starts at the curve, and then this vertex is sitting roughly in the middle. Maybe then we can increase it up to 4, not too many, just enough to create that curve for us. Okay, and now we've got that shape in there as well. So you see, I'm really just taking my time. I'm not worried about topology or n-gons because I know I can clean that up later. We're not going very high turbo to begin with. We're just keeping things nice and simple. If I come to the side view, you can see we have this part that curves around here. And again, if I look at my reference, you see that here, okay? And there's this extra bevel here as well, but I know that I can go ahead and add that in afterwards. And the important thing to me is getting this curve in first. So let's go ahead and add that. And this isn't quite a normal bevel. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to add an edge loop to begin with, okay? And as the topology starts to change, you'll notice that the multi-cut tool might not always be your best friend because you have to start adding things manually, but that's okay. And I'm just going to move that edge down to where that curve starts from. Then we'll just pull this vertex back so that blocks in that shape, right? So the curve isn't there yet, but we do roughly have the shape in. Then we can just go ahead and add in another edge. And then we'll just move this out. Okay. And now I know we have that shape in there. We can then go ahead and maybe add in 2 more edges just to make sure that we're getting the curvature nice. And then we can do an edit edge flow as well to get that curve to look nice. Come back to our reference just to make sure that's matching correctly. Maybe adjust a few things. Okay. So now we've got that curve in as well. And you can see it's very quickly starting to take shape. Now that we've got this curve in, it's going to be easier for us to tackle this bevel that comes around there. So what we can do for that is we'll literally just select these edges, the ones that we need to bevel. Okay. And then we'll just do a bevel. And we'll just increase that fraction until it roughly matches. And you can see that it's not entirely consistent. It does change shape, but because we have a very low vertex count, we can afford just to move things down around a little bit, right? We can just lift that up Maybe occasionally on a surface like this, we might hold down Control and Shift, so we're doing an edge slide so things stay nice and even. Okay, and then this is looking a bit funny, so we can just hold down V and then just angle snap that. And here, this is something we can fix afterwards. Maybe we'll select these faces, or these vertices. We'll do a quick deform and lattice. And again, deformers are really, really helpful as well when you're in this stage, just to quickly create curves like this or angles. We'll just pull that back so that matches. Now, all we need to do is just grab that vertex, and then we will just slide this down. We'll set the pivot point to that angle, and we'll just go like this. Okay, maybe tweak a few of these to make the curve nicer. Okay, and you can see we're very, very quickly blocking out that shape. Okay, we really haven't spent much time on this at all. I think we're 25 minutes into the recording, and we're already making a lot of progress on a shape, which is a little bit complicated. And it's, you know, you can see we're already making a little bit of some mistakes here. That's gone in and collapsed, so we can very, very quickly fix that. I'm just going to go into face select mode, set the pivot point to one of the corners. If you don't know how to do that, by the way, I'm pressing D, and then that's allowing me to snap by holding V to select a vertex. And then we can just go bloop, and then flatten that out. And now that's fixed, okay? So you can see it really doesn't take much time at all to block this out, but also it's okay to go even slower than this. If you're really, really comfortable, it's okay to go faster, but I think slow is always better if you're gonna get it right. You know, better to be slow and do it right than go fast to make mistakes, or more mistakes than you need to. So yeah. What I want you guys to go ahead and do now then, if you want to follow along with this, is to finish up the rest of the blocking. I am going to go ahead and block out the rest of this in much the same way I have here. I probably wouldn't take this shape much further than I have already, other than, you know, duplicating this on the other side to make sure that's equal, right? And then going ahead and then like carving out the body so that it matches with these angles in the same way that I would the head, okay? But as long as you're keeping it simple, like the way I'm doing here, don't worry about the topology so much. Don't really go much higher res than this because you don't need to at this stage. Then you'll be absolutely fine, okay? Take all the time that you need. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just like I just showed you, I've made a bunch of mistakes already, but you can see because it's simple, we can very, very quickly fix them. I'll block mine out too. If you can, get as much of the model in as possible, but if not, that's okay too. If you want to just focus on a specific part, that's totally fine. And in the next part, we'll look at finalizing the blocking into the, so that we have the final shape, and then we can move on to doing details in that part as well. So I hope this has been helpful. I wasn't sure whether or not to block out this whole thing on video. It might be really, really long if I do that, and we're already coming up on half an hour. But I just wanted to show you how I generally approach this to begin with, by creating some of these shapes here. And then hopefully that's enough to get you going. If you want to follow along, you can do the rest in your own time, and then we can come back next time to look at finishing this up and doing the details as well. But yeah, again, don't worry, keep it super simple, not much more complicated than this. And then we'll finalize everything in the next part before moving on to details. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Again, do not be afraid to make mistakes. Do not be afraid to make your time. It's all part of the learning process. You have to start somewhere. I still make mistakes. You know, it's just how it goes. Any questions at all, please do leave them in the comments. Any suggestions as well. Really, really grateful for those. Thank you all that responded to the questionnaire that I put out as well. That's been super helpful. Seems like a lot of you want more hard surface content, as well as some advice on getting into VFX or 3D in general, and more shading videos with Arnold. So those will be coming as well. But yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.